Hello and welcome to the Moviescramble podcast. Today I am joined by the ever delightful Mary. How the hell are you doing, Mary? How's things?
I am definitely not as bronzed as you big Neapolitan god, but I am delighted to be here and to be chatting about this film.
Nice. That's in relation to the fact that I'm just back from a wee week away in Naples, where it was a very nice 20 to 24 degrees every day, and it only rained once for about an hour in total. So yeah, it was very pleasant, very nice indeed. But anyway, I digress. Today we are here to talk about Monkey Man.
If a man wishes to challenge the gods, he must become more than a man. He must become a beast.
The very new film by Dev Patel. It's only just out in cinemas, I think maybe a week or a week and a half. It's very, very recent. It's a film that was originally conceived and publicised back in 2018. Dev Patel had announced that he was going to be involved in this film. Initially, it was going to be Neil Blomkamp, who Dev had worked with. I say Dev as if I know him. As if he's a pal, you know.
Our friend Dev, yeah.
Yeah. He approached Neil Blomkamp to direct the film, but he was unavailable, and he suggested that Dev Patel should actually give it a go himself. As with a lot of things around about that time, by the time they got the financing in place and they were in a position to actually film, the pandemic hit and everything got shut down for a couple of years, which put it on the back burner. But in between times, Netflix actually bought the rights to the film for $30 million, which was based on a $10 million budget for the film. The film was completed last year, and Netflix took one look at it and says, I don't think we really want to do this. Now we'll go into why they didn't want to do that in a few moments. Fortunately for the film, Jordan Peele managed to catch it and liked it so much that through his Monkey Paw Productions label, he was able to persuade Universal Pictures to purchase the film from Netflix. Netflix were basically going to use it as a write-off. I don't think they were going to do anything with it. They're just going to shelve it. Universal took it, put it out into cinemas, and it has been a success. It took just over $20 million in the first week or so of its opening. So it's basically made back its budget, and they obviously have 30 million in the bank anyway from the fact that Netflix gave them for the distribution rights to it. So you can say, even without actually having seen the film, that it's been a bit of a success now. The film itself, it's set in, I don't know if it's an unnamed town in India. I don't think it's
called Yatana. It's a fictional place.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's kind of, I think it's meant to look like Mumbai, though, the way that they've done the films. Basically, Dev Patel plays the character, or basically an unnamed character, is just called Kid in it. As a young child, he witnesses a social injustice within his village where all the land is taken away from them by people in power, and there's a tragedy and his mother's killed, and he sees all this happening and basically says, I'm going to take revenge. And you join him when he's an adult. He's working in this underground fighting club. He is the Monkey Man. He wears a monkey mask when he's fighting, which is actually a very clever use of both a mask, and it feeds into the whole backstory of him as a child and things he had in his past as well. And from there, he is able to work his way into a very sort of high-end brothel, which is involved with all these people in power. And he's trying to get to the various people who were involved in the death of his mother. Pretty straightforward setup. We've kind of seen revenge films before. This is maybe slightly different in that the setting of it. But Mary, what were your initial thoughts on Monkey Man?
So I went into this fairly blind. I was expecting a sort of standard revenge thriller, as you say. I didn't really visualize Dev Patel as a badass, so I was extremely surprised at how, you know, really high caliber this film was. You know, if that's only got a budget of £10 million, I am shocked, because I thought it was so well done. I think it's definitely a film that benefits from the cultural nuance that the setting brings. It's not just a standard Hollywood action flick. There's lots of, you know, religion and politics and gender politics that are going on, that sort of add all these different layers into not just the film as a whole, but, you know, Dev Patel's character and why he's seeking this particular revenge. So I thought it was absolutely gorgeous to look at. You know, there were some really standout moments, which I'm sure we'll go on to. But just I went in sort of maybe not expecting nothing, but just not expecting to be as caught up in it as I was. I thought it was a really, really brilliant directorial debut.
It was very impressive. You can tell that he put a lot of time and effort into the way that the film was actually set up and the way that the story was told. I was very impressed by the way that they held certain things back and they fed it to you in almost like an organic way, rather than like having big reveals and things, because you figured out pretty early on who he was actually going up against, because there was these sort of wee mini flashbacks that he was having and everything. Introduced to the fact that he was able to handle himself quite early as well. There was a very early, well, you're introduced to him as the Monkey Man.
Yeah.
So you knew that he was a fighter, but you always got the sense, even from early on, that you weren't seeing the full picture. You weren't seeing him properly as a fighter, because he was always holding something back, because the fights were fixed. The Monkey Man is the bad guy, if you like, within the ring. So there's always it's always like a good versus evil, even within these sort of underground fight things. And it was interesting to see how that was going to be developed. Now, they could have done it in a very sort of standard Hollywood way, but they didn't really. It was slightly different. There were montage sequences, let's face it.
There was a montage training sequence,
Yeah.
There definitely was.
But he was there at that sort of level even before the montage sequence. So yeah, I felt it was really interesting. And like you say, it looked a lot more expensive than it did, but that was through technique.
Squeezed every cent out of that budget.
Yeah, it was the filming techniques themselves, the way that they shot the city. They showed the differences between the rich and the poor, so therefore that reinforced some of the themes of the film, which we'll come to as well. And apparently, in order to save money, they changed some of the shots, so they did them as like Steadicam shots. They actually did some filming on iPhones as well, which you can tell, which it didn't detract from the film in any way, because it fitted in with what they were trying to film in those sort of moments. So yeah, and there's even a chase sequence in it, so you can't go wrong.
An unusual chase sequence, it has to be.
Yes.
I've never seen one quite like it.
Well, there was it involved a tuk-tuk, but obviously a very sort of souped up tuk-tuk. And the last film that we saw that in was the Indiana Jones film from last year.
I was thinking Extraction, but no, you're right.
Yeah, no, you're right. There wasn't that as well, but it seems to be, I think it's got to do with the fact of where they're filming. You know, it's not just straightforward. It's not based in New York or LA or London or Paris. It's now, they're trying to reach a more global audience with films. So they'll know that if it's an action film, it will sell no matter where. But if they involve these elements to it, then it brings in massive audiences. Like India, for instance, has a massive cinema audience. So if they can get people in seats to watch the film. Having said that, it hasn't been released in India yet because of certification problems. I think it's a difficult film to promote in India because of some of the themes and some of the real life comparisons against which they're using. But having said that, what did you think of the way that they changed it from just being an sort of a straightforward action film, using they used elements, they used themes which were unique to the area. So, but some of them were actually sort of more global as well. Obviously, I'm thinking in terms of the fact that obviously there's corruption and discrimination and things like that, but there's also, like, there was gender in there as well. There's gender imbalance, and there was all sorts of stuff. Even there's stuff to do with the transgender community and everything as well. So did you think that that was something that was unusual to see in this type of film, and did it work?
Absolutely. I mean, let's be honest, as much as I love, a big car crash and people shooting people, by and large, if you're not the, strutting hero in a lot of these films, you're a secondary character, and this always happens to women in particular. And I know that Dev Patel has spoken in the past about how difficult it's been to get roles as a person of colour, so you can't help but feel that he's purposely included a lot of otherness in this film to sort of bring these different communities and backgrounds into a genre where they maybe wouldn't usually be found. But I think it definitely, as I kind of touched on this in the review that I did for the site, it also implies that violence isn't just people punching each other, that there's a violence within, poverty and sexual exploitation, and, politics even has its own sort of undertones of violence when there's a kind of revolution sort of shown in this film, and this sort of alleged holy man presents himself as being part of this political party that he thinks is going to change India, but actually it's all about how he can line his own pockets. So I think it's every sort of nuance of contemporary Indian life in terms of, gender politics, sexual identity, actual politics, and then, poverty and inequality, I think it's explored in a way that's really well fleshed out. It doesn't feel like it's been shoehorned in. It doesn't feel like it's just been thrown in to grab another, section of audience that maybe don't typically go and see these types of films. And actually it works as a sort of cultural exploration on the whole of the setting of this film. And I think it's that level of depth and layering and sort of introducing all these different characters that makes you not just, it is an underdog film, it is a revenge thriller, but it gives all these layers to it that makes it feel a bit more grown up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was initially marketed as John Wick in Mumbai, which I think does it a bit of a disservice, to be perfectly honest, because you can't really compare.
Although he does make a John Wick joke in the film,
yes,
because he goes to purchase a gun, and they're like, "Oh, this is the gun they used in John Wick 4. You should buy this," which I did think was quite funny.
Yeah, but then obviously he can't afford it because he's got a very limited budget. So yeah, he has to get something that's a bit heavier and everything. So yeah, and there was always the sort of dog reference as well, because he starts taking care of a puppy, and I thought, they're not going to kill the dog, are they? Oh, come on. It's a wee bit on the nose. No, I know what you mean in terms of violence, because violence is not always knives and guns and everything. It can be very casual. There was a quick scene, I think it was part of a sort of a setup towards the beginning of the third act, where there was all these women lined up and they were being inspected by the madam, and she would just casually slap somebody just to get them back into line. And it's that kind of violence, it's just that every day it's not going to draw blood or anything, but it's just a constant factor in your life. There's violence involved in it at all times. And like you say, there was violence towards various groups. It was the sort of disenfranchised. There was an element of obviously the transgender people who all formed a commune, and at one point he was basically hiding out there, and he was safe there because the authorities were scared of them. They were scared to go in, just because, not because they felt they were powerful or anything, but they didn't understand them. They were just far too weird for them. It just didn't compute. They didn't really understand what they were about and why they did what they did. So yeah, it was I thought it was, really nicely done in those sort of terms. The look of the film itself, now I've touched on it, he's used different styles and different cameras, and there was various different sort of scenarios. There was fight sequences, there was a boxing sequence, the stuff that was based around his village and everything. So how did you think that all kind of played out? Did you think it all worked together? Was it seamless? Did it help tell a story? Because a lot of the time it doesn't tell the story of a film by the way it's shot. It's shot in a very similar style all the way through, so you can't tell. You get that a lot with network television programs, for instance. They're on a limited budget, so that they'll look the same no matter what the setup is. They don't make allowances for that because it takes too much planning and too much money probably as well. So how did you think the film handled that?
I think it definitely works. I think it's a film that relies on contrast, right? The most obvious one being the rich and poor, and actually the contrasting styles of shooting really lend itself to the sort of bigger picture, if you'll pardon the pun. I love this really tight close-ups of fight sequences. I always love a fight in a lift, and this film gave you a fight in a lift, and it was tight and it was in your face, and you felt like you were standing in the lift next to them going, oh God, am I next? But then you've got this sort of, the shaky cam swirling stuff where they're in the boxing ring and it feels very disorientating. And then you've got the beautiful sweeping shots of his flashbacks, which feel like very crisp and, very luscious, obviously like verdant countryside. But then you've got like, I think towards maybe about 2/3 of the way through, you've got this kind of like dream sequence where the kid opens his chest and we as viewers go through his, and again, there's an entirely different filmmaking style there, which probably culturally feels quite aligned to a lot of like, Bollywood films in the sense of it takes you out of it for a little bit. It's not a musical number, but it takes you out of what's actually happening. But I think it really benefits from mixing up the different styles of shooting, because it's a film that very much benefits from labyrinthine, sort of sleazy, neon, like shanty towns almost, but then like the huge glass and steel of the city and the countryside. So there's all these different things going on, and therefore it almost seems fitting that there's different shooting styles used to capture each element of the kid's story.
Yeah. A lot of the poverty shots, for want of a better phrase, were shaky cam, and the camera was always moving, and the colours of it as well, they were all muted. They were browns, they were dirty, it was dark, it was dingy.
It's a film that feels very grimy quite a lot of the time. That sense.
And then it would suddenly just cut to sort of the higher society, and everything was neon, and it was all very nice sheen to it and polished, and everything looked new. There was one shot.
Even the Coke came in fancy little gold containers, which I've never seen before.
You've been hanging about in the wrong places, obviously. So the chest opening bit was to do. Apparently, it was to do with, is it Hanuman, the
god?
Yes, because there's paintings and pictures where actually opening the chest, it's got to do with the fact that there was a wee bit at the start where the sort of background to Hanuman, where he thought he was reaching for a mango and it was actually the sun that he swallowed, and opening up, and it's opening up the sun apparently. I've read a wee bit about it, don't understand an awful lot about it, but I think that's what it was. There's pictures of him pulling the chest open, so I think that's a reference to that. But like you're saying, it goes into this, it's almost like a dream
puppet show kind of thing that it starts off with, and it goes. It's a really lovely sequence actually, because it's so different. I mean, let's be honest, this film, there are a couple of wisecracks in this film, but it's grim and it's heavy and it's it's almost kind of sticky with the sort of the themes and the violence that's going on. So actually, that was a sort of nice little interlude, albeit it was revealing more trauma, but it was a sort of unusual way of doing it.
Yeah, and Hanuman is portrayed a lot of the time as a monkey as well, which adds into the whole monkey man things. So that's why he's wearing the mask, because the initial story of Hanuman is described by his mum in the opening sequences, then just cuts to a fighting sequence, and it's the full, like you say, in his face. The camera's right up there, right in front of him, very sort of close up. So yeah, it was really interesting to see all that kind of play in to the way that they told the story and the use of the cameras and everything. Like I said, there was one shot where it was almost, the screen was cut in half, and the top half was all lovely and neon. I think it was a helicopter or something. It was going through a couple of buildings. It was all lovely neon, and then like underneath it, it was just grimy and dark, and it was like the streets, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was I thought really, really well done, and it worked on the various levels that you were looking for in this kind of thing to make it more interesting than just him beating up a few people, getting injured, beating up another few people, getting injured. And then it's almost like a video game at that point, like a fighting game. You're going through the various boss levels until you get to the end boss. Now, that's not to say these films kind of work in that way anyway. And this film, to a certain extent, is not that different to that. But I felt that the way that they got to the end really worked because there was solid reasons why he was doing it, and then there was stuff that was added to it as well, why he was actually seeking revenge, and it just seemed to, I just thought, I really enjoyed that. What did you think about? Obviously, Dev Patel is the main character in this. He's in pretty much every scene. There's very few scenes that he's not in. What did you think about the people who were around him, his supporting cast in this? Do you think they were good, bad, indifferent? I mean, some of them had very, very small roles, like the boy that helps him out as well. He had like maybe 3 scenes or something. But there was a few characters in there which, for one reason or another, were important to the story. How do you think they actually fitted in with the story? Do you think they were useful? Do you think they were overused, underused?
No, I mean, I thought so. Sikander Kher, who plays the chief of police, Rana, what a gorgeous villain. Like, from the minute you laid eyes on him, you were like, this guy's an arsehole. I want him to die the slowest, most painful death possible. There was just something about him where, he sort of bursts into the scene, he's got his uniform on, he's smoking, but he's posturing, he's got that kind of pigeon chest that men get when they're trying to sort of assert their authority. Yep. And from the minute you clapped eyes on him, you were like, I hate you. I don't know. You don't know anything about him as a character other than he's just arrived in the kids' village, in the flashback. But immediately you're like, yeah, I want you to get your arse kicked. So as a villain, I thought he served his purpose very well. But then you've got all these sort of other people like Queenie, who's Rana's wife, who's a total shit as well. She runs the brothel and she's obviously awful to everyone. And then you've got Baba Shakti, who is the guru, played by Krand Deshpande, who is ostensibly this peace-loving man who just wants his followers to have a fair crack at the whip, but is obviously running some sort of nefarious cult where he's exploiting people and he's encouraging violence against, minority communities and things like that. So even the sort of smaller characters did have layers to them. And in particular, Vipin Sharma, who played Alpha, who is the sort of leader of the transgender community within the temple, I thought, what a fantastic performance that was, because he was so knowledgeable about the gods and goddesses that he was sharing with the kids, and he was so nurturing within his community. But then when the time called for it, he was also an absolute badass, and that sort of gave way to my favourite sequences in the film. But no, I thought that for a film that's quite definitely a Dev Patel vehicle, it's about his character and where he's going, but I thought that a lot of the supporting cast gave really excellent performances, despite probably maybe only having about sometimes maybe 15 minutes of screen time, but actually still felt fleshed out. As I say, Sikander Kher is the villain, is there to be the villain. But even he felt like he had a little bit of a backstory going on and how he'd maybe sort of become involved in the corruption. So I thought it was very well done. But again, it was all sort of tied in with the cultural setting and expectations within the film. It's highly unlikely that you would have a film in Hollywood where you would have some sort of like spiritual preacher starting a cult. You probably would, but there's certain layers and nuance to it here that don't apply anywhere else. And I thought that those characters were very well fleshed out, and you knew who you were rooting for and who you were there to hate, and it was straightforward in that sense, but very well done.
Yeah, it definitely is. I particularly liked the sort of lead female characters. The madam who ran the sort of high-end brothel. You hated her as well as soon as you met her, just because
she was horrible.
Yeah, but in a way she was very powerful as well. It was a powerful performance because she didn't take any shit from anybody. She was in charge of everything, and it came across right away that everybody was scared of her. And it was even before she'd actually uttered a word. everybody was just very, I don't know what to do. And obviously then there was the young woman who was one of the ladies who was in the club as well. Now, in a lesser film, there would have been a romantic entanglement between them.
Yes, and I am so glad they didn't do that.
Yeah, and it's the obvious thing to do in these type of films, because then they think that it adds another layer of complexity, another reason for doing something. But I liked the fact that this didn't do that at all. It didn't go, and then this is giving nothing away whatsoever. We're steering clear of spoilers, obviously, but the fact that there was no final kiss of anything. Yeah, pretty much. Yes, yeah. I was really, really impressed with that. That's good filmmaking, because I would assume that at some point during a production meeting, someone from Netflix would have said, these people need to be together. Now, having said that, Netflix didn't actually realise what they were getting in terms of this film.
I'm so intrigued by this, because I knew that Jordan Peele had bought it, but why did Netflix back out? This seems like a huge mistake on their end, but obviously we benefit because we get to see it in the cinema.
Apparently Netflix backed out because they are trying to increase their market share in India. And when the film was pitched to them, they didn't fully realise what the final product would be. And they thought they were just getting an action film. Now, they didn't realise there was going to be so much in terms of the politics and the sort of the social justice elements to it. That has reflected real life problems within India, and the spiritual leader has been seen as being very close to the Indian Prime Minister. Is it Modi? I think he is.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't realise there was
I don't think they're too far away from each other in terms of the way they look and the way that they actually come across, sort of broadcasting on television, things like that.
Wow.
And Netflix were kind of like, well, I don't think we can sell this.
Oh, they've shut the bed.
Well, basically, yeah. It was going to be a hard sell for them to put it out there. Now, why they didn't have more oversight during the process and actually maybe read the script.
Maybe because there was so many breakdowns, though. Like, I mean, I
Possibly.
know that I've read that Dev Patel sustained just about every injury he possibly could, right down to like a really bad case of conjunctivitis while filming this. Maybe because there was, COVID, they had to relocate to Indonesia to shoot as well,
yes,
I think.
That's right,
and he obviously sustained a number of injuries. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Netflix weren't keeping an eye on it, but you would think they would have read a script. You would have assumed that.
You would have thought that, because obviously all their strategies are kind of long-term strategies, so they wouldn't be saying, oh, wait a minute, we've got this film, it may be a wee bit controversial in India. Let's do something about it now, because they would have thought about how they expand into various markets years and years ahead of actually doing it. So yes, I think you're right. They shut the bed on this one, they definitely did. And they were just going to shelf it, which obviously meant that's
insane.
No, but it does happen. Things get buried. A lot of film companies, like obviously they buy a lot of films, especially like at South by Southwest, where this film debuted. There's a lot of films go to these film festivals and they don't have anything in terms of distribution. So it's basically.
Oh, in fairness, we've spoken about this, where we see a film at a film festival, we love it, and then we go, where the fuck would you watch that?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But this has cinema written all over it, so that's why I'm so surprised.
Yeah, yep. I mean, it's got a named actor who's fronting it up and quite happy to do all of the publicity for it, because obviously it's his project. And he's going to be front and centre for every single piece of public engagement on the film, so that's a major plus. But
Sikander Khair's a big name as well, and he was in Sense8, which was also on Netflix, so he's a big name as well.
Yeah.
It's just my own ignorance that I don't know any of the rest of the cast, but I know that he definitely is as well. So your sort of protagonist and antagonist are both big names. So if you're wanting to get into an Indian market, you've got. I mean, obviously, as I say, it's the story and the themes that are the problem there. But actually, they've got two big names at the start. I just think that's insane.
I know.
And also, do you know what's funny? Because, and I said this in our film festival podcast about how Viggo Mortensen was talking about how hard it is to get a film made, which I couldn't believe, because he's Viggo Mortensen and that's a name, and you would just think people would be throwing money at him. But for Dev Patel to have achieved all of this on a shoestring budget, let's be honest, for the type of film that it is, and to have an actor of color in the lead role, to be really confronting sort of global politics or whatever, and to be including transgender characters and all the rest of it. Netflix have shat the bed is the bottom line. It must have been so hard for him to even scrape together some budget in the first place to get this done. And actually, I really hope it makes fucking millions now. That's really annoying me.
like I said at the top of the program, the film is in profit already because of the fact that it was bought for 30 million by Netflix, and then they sold it for less than 10. They said it was. Now, none of those costs would have come from the actual production themselves. They had their budget of $10 million, so therefore they've made 30 million. It doesn't. Netflix have lost out of it. Universal have paid less than 10 million. They've made their money back already, because it's usually double the budget is when you start breaking even in the film. So they've already made close to $20 million on it. So therefore they've made money. And I get the irony is this will end up on a streaming service somewhere after it's had its theatrical run.
Yeah.
So,
but what it's obviously not going to go back to Netflix. What I think has actually been quite funny, and this has been obviously accidental, is that two of the big releases this week have been Monkey Man and The First Omen, and they have very similar black and red posters. So I think a lot of people will just go and see them, maybe double bill, just because they are out at the same time, and the posters obviously visually look very similar. But I just think that I can't imagine how Netflix have been surprised by the final product, which, as you said, did not read a script. But equally, I think I've become more cognizant in the past as well about how hard it is to actually get a film made, even if you are an established person. And therefore, for the thought of Netflix just binning this just seems really appalling. Yeah.
A lot of times it's not, a director doesn't work on his own. He creates a production company or a filmmaker, an actor, the likes of George Clooney, for instance. I keep talking about George Clooney in these sort of situations. He created a film company and joined up with producers that he knew could deliver. So it's always down to the producers to get the money in. So you have to be able to work with these people. A top line name will only take you so far. And with the likes of Viggo Mortensen, yes, we regard him as being a top film actor, someone that we would go and see in a film. But in terms of people who are financing films, they'll say, well, when was Lord of the Rings? When did that finish? Was that like 2003? So that was, maybe 20 years ago, we would have been right in there financing something of his. But, and they would say, well, what's he done since? And obviously he's got a body of work, the length of most people's arms in the last 20 years. And it's been quality products and he's been really good. But people would just look purely at the numbers and say, well, he was in Captain Fantastic, Did that make a lot of money? No, not really. No, yeah. And he was.
I know it's like he's not been another Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
That's, Yes.
Yeah, he's not at that level. He's not at the sort of the Tom Hanks, even Tom Hanks, I suppose these days, but Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise level, where their name can guarantee money coming into it. And obviously,
an audience,
it'll guarantee an audience and it'll guarantee the money to actually make the film in the first place. To such an extent with Tom Cruise that he's obviously got a production deal with Paramount, sort of first look deal, which they're starting to do again with quite a lot of people. They're like Timothy Chalamet's got a first look deal with, I think it's Paramount as well. So because
I don't get the Timothy Chalamet hype. I don't get it.
I think he's pretty good, but yes, it seems very early in his career for that sort of thing. But it guarantees a certain amount of product that he's going to make. So if he's going to make something, it's going to be with them. So therefore, they get first look at it. If they say, well, no, we'll pass on that, you can take it to somebody else. But at least then, if they're going to take it on, he's automatically got finance, and he doesn't have to have this myriad of partners, which takes up about 3 minutes of screen time at the start when you're seeing all the logos, all that sort of stuff. Which I would estimate that at the film festival, you probably saw a film's worth of credits. If you actually watched all the credits, it would have probably taken you about an hour and a half.
100%. And I tell you what's been really bad for that recently. We went to see Late Night with the Devil, and I swear there's a solid 8 minutes of production companies before people were actually laughing because you thought they would finish and another one would appear. I mean, that's a great film, so it's a shame because people were chuckling, but I've never seen so many production companies before a film in my entire life. But that's, as I say, that's by the by. It is a really, really good film. I would encourage people to go and see it. But I couldn't believe. But you're probably right. Film festivals as well. It's like, and this studio, and this studio, and this studio. This didn't really have that. But still, I can imagine it would have been a hard push. And I suppose, I'm assuming once Jordan Peele came on board with Monkey Paw Productions, he maybe had a plan for it already and thought.
Yeah, I think he knew that it was being put to the side. So therefore, there was an opportunity there. He'd seen the film and he thought this could do a bit of business, and he has a deal with Universal at the moment as well through Monkey Paw. So he does I think most of his stuff actually comes out through Universal since I don't know if it was Get Out, but it might have been after. It might have been Us, because the last couple have been through him, and I think he's done other bits and pieces through them, some television stuff and all that as well. So he has a certain amount of clout there, and he is a name. So if you can get a name, coming in as a producer, he has sort of name recognition as well, which can always add to the film. The mere fact that we're talking about him as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yes, so I think he was instrumental in getting it into cinemas, getting Universal to
thank
back
you,
it.
Jordan Peele.
Yes,
because it's so deserved. It's one of these films where you. Obviously, I went to see it in the cinema, as did you. And as I was watching it, just knowing that Netflix had kind of ditched it or had allowed it to be purchased or whatever, when I came out of it, I thought it just wouldn't have been the same watching it at home. Now, I obviously do watch a lot of stuff on streaming services. I'm not denigrating that, but this is very much one of these films where you're benefiting from, the sound or lack of sometimes, the big screen. I mean, I will just say that kudos to, is it Jed Kurzel, who had a man getting his arse kicked to Boney M, which might just be one of my cinematic highlights of the year. And it just wouldn't have landed the same in the house.
Yeah, there was, obviously I'm not giving anything away, but there is a big sort of showdown fight sequence. You would expect that from this. And during that sequence, you would expect something propulsive, dynamic, bombastic, but you don't get that. It's actually quite a laid-back track. It's playing underneath the fact that two people are trying to kick the shit out of each other and like hitting each other with bottles and stuff, and it works really well as a contrast to it.
Really did. It really did. It's almost like the Oppenheimer bomb where you'd expected the explosion and you hear nothing. It was not quite on that scale, but definitely we are used to a certain type of soundtrack with this type of film, and this deviates from it quite a lot.
Yeah, that kind of shows a level of cinematic intelligence. I like seeing things
and confidence, I think, as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Take people out of what they're used to with this, because this genre. I'm not saying that people I'm not saying all films are formulaic, but action films in particular can be, and especially a revenge thriller. So I think to have a little bit of confidence to go, actually, you guys are expecting X, and so I'm going to give you something completely different. I think that shows, as I say, for a directorial debut, it's really impressive.
I think the fact that it was a reasonably low budget film, and by all accounts, they were left just to go on with it. So therefore, they can do these things and try these things, and they obviously work. But yes, it is. I hate using the word bold, but it is kind of, it's just a certain, like I say, it's an intelligence thing. It's just, this is what we could do because everybody else is doing it, but let's see what sort of fits in with what we're trying to do here. We are not trying to do a sort of standard action film. We're trying to do something that's a little more, not cerebral, but it is making you think a little bit more. Now, I think I probably missed quite a lot from this film based on the fact that I don't know very much about Indian politics. I know obviously a wee bit about Indian culture, the caste system and things like that, primarily because I'd seen a film about it a couple of weeks ago and they were talking about the caste system, so it was quite fresh in my mind still. So I think I probably did miss out on a wee bit, and obviously I had to look up stuff with regards to the way that they're using the deity and everything in it and all that. Do you think you got a lot out of it, or do you think there's like other layers in there that you could probably get out of it? You know, I know we shouldn't have to do homework in order to watch a film,
But having said that, though, this is one of these films where I'm actually quite happy to go away and do a bit of reading, because, you know, I'm almost sort of embarrassed about my ignorance towards certain elements of, you know, Indian culture. Like yourself, I'm familiar with, you know, so Diwali, obviously the big religious festival that happens in the film, familiar with that, familiar with the caste system, probably not familiar enough with Indian politics because it doesn't feature in the news as often as, say, you know, Russian politics or Middle Eastern politics. But actually, it's one of these films where I was quite happy to go away and do a bit of reading and do a bit of Googling, as it were, because I enjoyed the film so much that I didn't mind going to do that. I don't like films that, in essence, make you feel stupid, and you do have to actually go and read a thesis in order to be able to understand what's happened in the film. This definitely doesn't do that, but there's obviously a lot more layers to it that if you were more sort of au fait with certain sort of cultural practices or whatever, you probably would get even more out of it. And Dev Patel obviously is, and that's woven into the film, but not in a way that, as I say, that takes away from your enjoyment if you don't know, because things are quite clearly explained, because obviously the kid's mother explains the sort of the story of the god to her son in a kind of fairy tale like version of that story. But it definitely made me want to go away and actually read a wee bit more, because it was very interesting.
No, you're right. I think it makes it worth a revisit after doing a wee bit of research as well. Would this be the type of film that you would get enjoyment or get more out of in a second viewing, maybe even a third viewing at some point? I'm not talking like next week and the week after, but do you think you would get something out of it by going back to it?
I definitely think so. Like, there's a couple of scenes in particular that stand out for me that I think I'm going to be thinking about for a wee while, just because I really like the choices that were made and the way they were shot. But there's also loads to it that, as I say, from a political or a cultural perspective, I'm just not familiar enough with. If I went back and watched it, and having done a wee bit of reading, would be like, oh, I understand that reference. But equally, just the character worked, although he was the sort of classic underdog. You know, there is a scene where Dev Patel, God love him, couldn't have looked any skinnier, and they put this like 9-foot unit in a boxing ring with him, and you're like, oh my God, he's going to die. But there was just, his character was so convincing, because it wasn't like the link to the revenge wasn't tenuous. It felt genuine. It felt like he had grown up really disgruntled by all these inequalities and everything that he faced. And so I was invested in him as a character. I would happily go back and watch it again just for that reason alone. It was a really great performance.
Yeah, there is a bit, it's actually in the trailer as well, when he's in the ring with the previous fighter, and there's a big build up, and Sharto Copley is doing his announcement and all this, and you know, he's like, and I brought him over from Africa, from the jungles and everything, and they have this massive big build up, and you think, oh, this is going to be like a big fight scene as part of his redemption and everything, and he just kicks him, and the guy goes straight down. And as I say, this is in the trailer, so I'm not giving anything away, and the place just falls into silence. And they all just, nobody knows what to do, and they're all kind of going, what's happening? And Sharto Copley Tiger is just standing there going, what the fuck?
Because even that, though, I didn't, like, at first I was just like, God, he's really getting his arse kicked. And it's only when he sort of goes to collect his pay at the end, he was like, oh, I'm owed double. And he's like, if you bleed more next time, you'll get. And I was like, oh, he's been paid to lose. Even stuff like that didn't occur to me, that people would purposely throw a fight.
Yeah. And I think what I got from that was that the Monkey Man character almost was like a bad guy even before he did it. So it didn't matter who was actually in the ring. They were all wearing the same mask, so it could have been anybody underneath the mask. So obviously, because you would think they have a limited lifespan in unlicensed boxing, you know. So yes.
I assume the head injuries become too much after a while.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. So, is there anything else that I haven't really covered? Is there anything within the film that you'd like to sort of highlight?
Yeah, I would just say I think the color palette is fantastic. As I say, you've got that sort of this kind of sleazy neon, like within all this sort of high class, but particularly within when it gets to the sort of Diwali scenes. There's the fireworks, there's the traditional outfits that I was so sort of soaked up in that I absolutely loved. And then you've got, you know, the contrast and like when you get into the sort of city and he's sleeping like 12 to a room and it's all brown and grey. There's also a really beautiful shot where this, I think it's maybe a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, skites past and the camera feels like it's placed on the pavement and like this cardboard sort of rustles and you see that there's 3 kids sleeping out on the pavement. And I'm just, it's a very obvious contrast to make, but because this car is that really bright pop of red against how grimy everything else looks. I just thought that the way they used colour was really effective, particularly in the political rallies as well, because obviously your guru comes out all head to toe in white, and the signs of the crowd are all different shades of red and white as well. I just thought it was really impactful. Again, I'm not saying it's like super cerebral, but it just sort of elevated the film a wee bit from your bog standards. Like they always joke that on Netflix, Mexico is yellow.
Yes, yeah.
And Eastern Europe is like grey. I felt like this used colour really well, which you would expect from a film set in India because Indian cinema is often very, very colourful. So I felt like it took elements of traditional Indian cinema and used them to make a point.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, the use of like red smoke and everything during the rallies, just like I say, it elevates it. It makes it more visually interesting. Which I mean, that's what you're looking for when you're watching a film. And I was amazed. I really shouldn't have been amazed because if I'd done a wee bit of reading, then I would have found out that Dev Patel actually did like taekwondo when he was younger, and he reached quite a good level of it. So he does have the skills there, but that's not always translating into being able to do action on screen. I think this is probably the first film where he's actually done anything like that. He's more usually the geeky guy, like leads, aye, like a dramatic lead, or like was it the Best Marigold Hotel? He's a sort of geeky, almost like he's still stick thin and everything, you know. Lots of things he's been in. I think he was in The Newsroom as well, was he not?
I haven't seen that. Is that the thing with
I think
Jeff
I was. I'm not sure.
Daniels?
Yes, yeah. I think he was in that, but every role he's been in, there's obviously quite a range, but I don't think he's done action before. So when you saw him actually getting into sort of action high gear, it was very, very impressive.
Oh, he's ripped.
He really was,
he's absolutely ripped. And again, I would say that the violence in this felt quite credible because there is moments where he is getting his arse handed to him. It's not like he's just working way through endless faceless goons and he's kicking the shit out. Like he is getting his, you know, head cracked off a sink and stuff like that as well, or, you know, being dipped in somebody else's vomit in a toilet. Like he is getting really, really badly beaten up. So that also felt credible because he wasn't just this like superhero fueled by revenge. He was fallible in some places as well.
Yeah, he needed a certain journey to get to that. He obviously had the skills, but it was focusing how he actually used them in order to get there. Yeah, I know what you mean, but yes, the action was really well done. I was really, really impressed by that. And it can't be easy being a star in an action film and being the director. So
I know you do. Wonder
going about
about
directing yourself and directing action. Obviously, you have a stunt coordinator, and a lot of times stunt coordinators go on to actually direct themselves, so because they have that eye for how things should look. So I think obviously some very good people around him when he was doing this, and it did kind of pay off. It definitely did. So I think this is a bit of a redundant question, but would you recommend this film?
Absolutely. Please go and see it in the cinema so that it gets, you know, your ticket bucks before it hits a streaming service that will definitely not be Netflix. But it's so enjoyable. It's so well done. There's loads and loads of layers to it, and it's absolutely worth your ticket price for sure.
Yep. Same. I would thoroughly recommend this film. I think it's already the speculation of a sequel, which I don't know if I really want to see, to be perfectly honest. I would like to see Dev Patel doing more directing work, and I think this is a very good promotional vehicle for the different type of work he can do, but it might be a little reductive doing another Monkey Man film, which but again, you know, you just never know if the story's there. I don't think he would be rushing into anything anyway. But let's face it, studios are always looking for franchises and things. So
that's true. But I just think it didn't. What I actually liked about this film as well is that I don't feel the ending set it up for a sequel at all. But I'm not surprised there's chatter of it if it's performing. But I think just I would be intrigued to see. I would love to see him in more films in general, but I would actually like to see more of his directorial work as well, because this certainly is this kind of sets the benchmark for what he's capable of.
Yeah. He's certainly very capable, which is always a nice thing. It's a nice surprise. You know, these people are not daft. You know, they're intelligent. They know the way that they talk about their craft. They know it's important. And he's obviously been paying very close attention to all the people he's been working with in the past and taking certain things from them, which has worked in this case. So yes, very impressive indeed. So I think that is us for today. We couldn't think of any way to tie in Monkey Man to anything else to elongate this chat for another 3/4 of an hour. So we will spare you from nonsense for today, which is quite nice. If you would like to get in touch with us, we are on all the usual social media channels. You can email us at podcast@moviescramble.co.uk or leave a message on the pod app of your choice. Tell us what you think about what we do. If you like what we do, we would really appreciate a rating as well. It's always very nice to get a little bit of feedback. And I think that is it. We shall be returning. We are trying to do things on a more regular basis, trying to get something done weekly, holidays and work and life permitting, obviously. We will be back next week. We've got a couple of pretty good ideas for stuff that we are going to be covering. We may cover Argylle, which is now on, I think it's on Apple TV actually. I think it may be.
Is it? Yeah.
I think it may just have started, but we have a number of options, and like we said, we may look at the new Omen film as well, if I can get off my arse and actually get to cinema to see it. So that would be good.
I would really like us to talk about that, because I think I'm not going to say what I'm going to say because it would give too much away, but
yeah,
I'm intrigued to hear your opinions.
Yeah, leave the podcast gold for the next episode.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much for lending us your ears for a short time. It's always appreciated. So see you later. Bye.
Bye.